Two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the First Live panel for Geek Out of Snug Harbor's Virtual Con. My name is Najib Dukawi. I am the founder and organizer of Geek Out of Snug Harbor. Welcome to our YouTube page. I am so excited to introduce you guys to your panelists, which are Cosplay for Science. Oh, look at them wave.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna have them take over for me because they know more about science stuff than I do, and they might know more about nerdy stuff than I do. So don't worry, I'll come back at the end to make sure I say bye. So I'm gonna hand it over to my friend Gabe here. See you guys later.
Thanks, Nacha. Well, hello, everybody. We are Cosplay for Science. My name's Gabe Santos. I'm one of the co-founders of this initiative. And for those of you who have not heard of us, Cosplay for Science is a science education initiative started by scientists to help people find the science in their everyday lives and interests and help all of you connect to the science, to anything that you love, whether it be Star Wars, Marvel, anime, anything that there is scientists out there to help you find and appreciate the science that goes into everything. So I think what we'll do is we'll start off with some introductions, and then we'll kind of go into what we do as scientists, and then a little bit more about how we use pop culture to help everyone appreciate science more. So like I said, my name is Gabriel Santos. I am a paleontologist and science educator at the Raymond Elf Museum of Paleontology in Los Angeles, California. I am one of the co-founders of Cosplay for Science. And most originally, my research revolved around studying evolution of marine mammals, things like ancient walruses and these really weird hippo animals called desmostylians. But more recently, my research has shifted into science education. So now I use natural history and paleontology at my museum to figure out how to help people learn better. And of course, I use cosplay and storytelling to do that a little bit more. So yeah, I'm just one of the many members of Cosplay for Science. We've got scientists and educators throughout the United States and now the world. And here are some of my amazing team members. And first up, let me introduce Dr. Sarah White. Sarah.
I am not a doctor yet, but thank you.
I jumped the gun. My bad.
Yeah, it's taken me a little longer to finish my PhD than I expected. But hi, everyone. I am Sarah. I am a PhD student at Northwestern University, and I consider myself a learning scientist. So I study learning everywhere that it happens, both online, in schools, virtual schools. But my PhD research really focuses on how teachers find resources online and the knowledge and decision making that's involved in that. So it's been really fun and it's been really interesting, especially during all of the online schooling that's happening right now. And I use science and Disney to teach people just about my favorite fandoms, and it's really an opportunity for me to teach myself things and then share that with other fans, and just really connect about the things that we love. And it's been a great side hobby during my PhD that's kept my spirits high. Oh, can't hear you.
I'm unmuted. Sorry. Thanks, Sarah. Next up, we have Jess Trinh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Trinh, as Gabe mentioned. I'm a PhD student as well in the University of California at Davis. So I'm here on the West Coast for y'all. So I would consider myself to be a microbiologist. And what that means is like studying things like bacteria and viruses like COVID-19, like the one that causes COVID-19, for example, and other tiny critters like that. And what I research is actually not human diseases, as deceptive as a macrophage cosplay can make it, but I actually research a plant disease. So yes, there are pandemics in plants, and yes, it can affect humans. Think about all the food that you eat that are grown by plants. Those are really susceptible to diseases. So just letting you know that. I'm pretty new to Cosplay for Science. I'm one of the community members, and I've written some blog posts for them and served on panels with them. And I'm really interested in doing science communication. I'm still pretty early on in my career, so like this is still sort of a side thing for me, but I would really love to get more into tying these strings of putting science and pop culture together, especially to make things more relatable for y'all. Because some of y'all some of y'all may enjoy science right now, or some of y'all may be deterred from it because it just seems so far away from you. So I really want to help bring that to life for you. That's all I have to say.
All right, thanks, Jess. And next up, we have Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Henning. I am a PhD candidate at Arizona State University, and I'm a biological engineer. So what's really interesting is that my research has spanned all the way from studying hearts, like chickens as human heart models, and studying how the human heart develops by like observing how they develop in other animals, such as chickens. That was my undergrad research. I've done cell and tissue engineering. So my master's degree was in biomaterials. So like if you've all had kombucha, the drink, you might not have known that cellulose producing bacteria are like in the culture for kombucha, and cellulose is the stuff in plants, and we use that stuff to make materials. So that was my master's degree, and that's why I haven't drank kombucha yet. Now I study wearables. So if you guys wear Fitbits, running watches, the sport functions on the Apple Watch, so I study how we can use wearables to estimate how much ultraviolet radiation exposure, like UV exposure, that we get when we're like walking, jogging, biking, and working outside. So I've been like last summer I had people run around outside with the sensor on their wrist, and I actually got some pretty cool data for like how much exposure we get in Arizona when we're outside. And so now I'm just trying to like I think like one of the things I just love the most about research is how to actually present that data, and what cosplaying and presenting at con panels also helped me with too is like, how do we take all of this crazy data like UV radiation exposure and then talk about it with people in a way that makes sense, and it's also related to pop culture as well. Yeah, so I'm also a Cosplay for Science community member, and I've been paneling for quite a while. Like one of my hobbies is to actually go to local cons and present on any, like basically I just take my favorite shows and talk about the science aspects of it. And my cosplay is Yusuke Urabeshi from Yu Yu Hakusho, which is a 90s anime. And another thing I do with my engineering is that I like making props. So Yusuke has a spirit particle gun. So I made some hand jewelry. And then I just soldered an LED light to a battery pack. And so I go around being like, I'm Yusuke Urameshi, I'm going to protect everybody from demons and spirits. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Alyssa. So yeah, those are our Cosplay for Science members. Like I said, we have many other members throughout the United States. If you're a scientist and you're looking to get involved with us, please let us know. We're always looking for more scientists to join and talk about things. And what Alyssa brought up is actually what we talk about next. As Cosplay for Science, our main way of getting people to learn about science and appreciate science and their favorite comic book, movie, whatever, is by going out and meeting people. You know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, the ivory tower, or scientists are not relatable to people. Science is something that is not very relatable. Well, for us, when we're in cosplay, it makes it that much more easy for folks to go and meet a scientist, whether you realize it at first or not. One of our main things to do is just show everybody at a convention that we are regular people. You know, scientists aren't these people who are in their labs all the time, who, you know, are scary. We're not trying to make people feel dumb. We want to share what we learn about with everybody. And so that's what we do with Cosplay for Science. We find the science, whether it's research related or not, and we try to help people find it and understand and appreciate it. So I think that's kind of what we'll do next. We'll talk a little bit about some science that is related to our cosplays, or any kind of really cool like science, pop culture inspired thing that we like to do in our own time. And we'll do a little bit of discussion from there. And if anybody's watching, we're happy to take any questions as well. I think I have the YouTube channel open for any questions, or you can send it to us on our Twitter at Cosplay For Science with the 4. There wasn't enough room to use FOR, and I didn't realize it till later. But yeah, so why don't we go around and take turns and talk a little bit how we use science in our pop culture. I can go last because you've heard me talk for a long time. So Sarah, why don't you go first?
All right. So yeah, I do mostly Disney fandom. So today I have a little Disney bound, which is kind of how I got into the cosplay community, but I'm still working my way up to more serious bounding, but I got my little Shuri jacket that I made myself for a Run Disney event. It was a princess themed, and I was like, Shuri is a princess technically, so I'm gonna go with Shuri, and she's a scientist. So I think I consider her my favorite scientist. This is the jacket she wears at the very end when they're in Oakland and going to start a new center in Oakland. So it's like at the very, very end and not one of the most like prevalent outfits. But yeah, I love Shuri. I love Marvel and just how they tell stories of women, especially, and how they're so much more empowered. And I do a lot of the science of could the things in Marvel actually happen? Could things in Disney princess movies actually happen? What might be the science behind that? So I've done a couple things of like, what would have caused Sleeping Beauty's coma, or like, what is the neuroscience of sleep and beauty sleep? So I do that mostly on Instagram and a blog that I have called The PhD Princess. Yeah, and other than that, I've also been really into Pandora, like the world of Avatar. I've been getting really into that, and I think it all starts from I was like a really big linguistics nerd when I was like in high school, and they came up with their whole entire language. They consulted a linguist. I studied linguistics in college, so I just think that that really fascinating aspect is a science, but more of a social science. And I'm really looking forward to writing some more about the linguistics and the different sounds that English doesn't have, but the Navi language does have, as well as all of the really fascinating science that James Cameron and all of his team members came up with to make a really, really cool world. Yeah, I'll stop there with what I'm talking about with Disney science.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And we met Sarah actually. I met Sarah online before she actually joined, but we started doing more work once we did the Disney Bound challenge on our Cosplay for Science Instagram, and that was really fun, trying to connect science to like all the outfits we were wearing, and that was really, really cool. Sarah did some really great stuff, so you can check it out on our Instagram there. So Jess, you want to hop in and talk about your science and cosplay?
Yeah, actually, I grew up loving doodling and stuff. So for class projects, I would make, I think I remember a couple times I made comic books about like certain historical events like the Revolutionary War or whatever. And I think I just grew up thinking like, it would be really cool if we could teach science or all these other concepts in a way that like is more friendly, is more fun. That's why I'm dressed up as cells at work, because I really love how everything's portrayed with like a particular personality. So you remember, oh, the macrophage basically just destroys everything. That's great. Or just thinking like, oh, these are cute and just adding a little bit of personal flair to things makes it way more memorable. And I think that is a really wonderful opportunity, and also just really great to put feeling in science where people feel like science just is a static block of need to memorize this. It's not like that at all. We definitely put a lot of feeling in our work. Like I get frustrated over failed experiments all the time. So that's one thing I have to say. Another thing I would like to say, this is going to sound like more of a joke. I really appreciate like science memes nowadays because of all these meme cultures. I see people posting up all these different memes of like biochem or all these different things that are like really niche, but people are finding humor in these things. I think that's super hilarious. Like make jokes, make really funny stuff, make analogies. Those are hilarious. If it gets you to remember it, that's great. And yeah, there's like a Facebook page that I recently started following. It's like science diagrams that look like something. Anyway, these people just post really funny pictures from these textbooks, and it's really hilarious. People making fun of it or trying to actually figure out what the diagrams are supposed to mean, and sometimes not getting it because admittedly science diagrams don't look super great. But I think those are like the biggest examples of pop culture that I can think of right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. And that's so true. It's like, with Cosplay for Science or anything that all of us do, even outside of cosplay, it's about making science relatable and accessible in a different way, right? It's finding ways that you can bring it into your everyday life and thinking about it, whether you're watching a movie, reading a comic book, browsing Instagram, Reddit, whatever. You'll find science somewhere. Alyssa, what do you got?
Sorry, oh my god, I always have some kind of object on my right hand, whether it's like a fake prosthetic arm for another character or the spirit gun. So I'm like, oh my gosh, clicking on things, so hard. Anyway, okay, so now that I'm unmuted, um, let's see. So I've just always been a geek my whole life. Like I just grew up watching Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and Naruto and all of that. And I guess I got into science paneling when I was in graduate school. And this was at Penn State for my master's. And I've heard people talk about cons. I've never been to one because where I grew up in Bakersfield, California, and I think Big Bang Theory did a whole like episode making fun of Bakersfield. They were trying to go to a con, and the joke is like there is no con. Like you can't really cosplay. Or at least back when I was growing up, cosplaying in Bakersfield was just unheard of. So when I went to grad school, and there was a local con around the Penn State area that's run by the school's anime club. I was like, wow, finally I can go to a con. And when I went there, and it's a community-run con. Like it's all like it's just like this con. It's all created by volunteers, and I saw that anybody could make a panel, or anybody could perform, anyone could run a workshop, and so starting in my second year, like the second time I attended that con, I just started submitting panels, and I learned about cosplay also, and so yeah, and that's how I got into geeky paneling. And I should also say I'm a musician as well. I play Japanese drums, and so with my Japanese drumming club at Penn State, we gotta perform too. So that's how we actually started doing cosplay. Our first performance was Mad Max Fury Road. Like if you guys remember, they had actual drums in that show. They weren't exactly taiko, but it was very similar to a particular taiko style. And so we just created that. Like we recreated the scene from the movie, and then we combined other stuff. Like a friend played violin, and another grad student friend sang. Like he was an a cappella singer in college. And so with all of that, like with their powers combined, we just created a really cool masquerade show. And that was really my first experience with cosplay and performance, and paneling as well. Like I actually started paneling when I came to Arizona. So like for my PhD, Arizona State has a culture of actually doing pop culture panels at Phoenix Comic Con, now called Fan Fusion. And so I just do multiple panels a year, and it's just a really fun way to just talk about my favorite shows and video games and books with friends who also love the same thing, and we can all just geek out together on stage. And my favorite part is when like you have an audience around you, like Gabe was saying, you're all part of a fandom conversation. It's just when you're at a panel, I mean, sure, you're approaching it from like a science perspective, but you're just one perspective of many in the conversation. And I just feel like we're one big family, like talking about the thing we love. Like, so anyway, that's how I got into science paneling and cosplay and going to conventions.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. And that's great because like for me, I have always loved paleontology. I love science, and I've also loved, things like Star Wars. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And they've always been kind of separate things in my life, unknowingly. But also at the same time, I never realized how much science fiction influenced my love of science. When I was a kid, I would always play Star Wars and think about like the animals in Star Wars. And funny enough, that translates to me today as a paleontologist. But, at my museum, I like to do things where I talk about how real life animals and real life fossils inspired the Star Wars universe or any kind of creature in science fiction. One of the things we do at Cosplay for Science is we do these things called pop-up museums. We bring actual natural history specimens from real museums, because I'm a paleontologist, our co-founders are paleontologists, and we go and we show real fossils and have people think about how these things in the real world inspired fantasy creatures. Like one of my favorite things to talk about is the tauntaun from Hoth, right? Tauntauns have adapted to living in very cold environments. They have very thick fur. But one of the things that I love to talk about most is if you look at their nose, they have very wide nostrils. Those are inspired by animals like bighorn sheep on our planet that have these wide nostrils so that they can breathe in cold air, warm it up, before it goes into their lungs. And that's an adaptation to cold environments that they took from real world and brought it into the Star Wars universe. And, you know, like I said, for me, a lot of what we try to do is just making science relatable. I even tell people that for my college admittance essay, I wrote about the first time I watched Empire Strikes Back and how that helped inspire my love of actually asking questions and talking about science. And surprise, I got into UC Irvine writing about Star Wars. So, haha. But again, it's about relatability, right? There are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, there are multiple reasons, they say science is not for them. They say that they have no interest in science, or that they're scared of science. And that's okay. It can be kind of scary. It can be very distant. But if you stop and think about some things that you love, there's probably science in there. One of my favorite examples is we were at a con and we started talking about anime inspired sciences. And I was talking about, no, I don't remember who was talking about, but somebody was talking about Full Metal Alchemist. And one of the kids in the audience came up to us at the end and is like, hey, thanks for that. You know, I thought I didn't like science. I thought chemistry was hard, but you just showed me that I do like chemistry, but in the form of Full Metal Alchemist. And he was like, I think I'm going to go read about that more. And I was like, oh, that's all we want to hear. That's all we want to hear. So yeah, that's a lot about what, like, again, Cosplay for Science is just making things relatable. So also really quick, for anybody who is watching us live, please ask us questions. You can type them in the chat and we're happy to answer them. So now let's go and kind of talk about, I guess, let's do a fun science fact about what we're wearing if everybody is interested in that, right? Alyssa, why don't you start this time?
Well, so I'm cosplaying Yusuke Urameshi from Yu Yu Hakusho, which is about, let's just say it's a middle school kid. He ends up, let's just say he ends up becoming a spirit detective. Let's just say he died. He was brought back to life with the purpose of protecting the earth from demons and spirits. So, I had an epiphany the other day that, Yu Yu Hakusho had demons and spirits, but there are other TV shows that also incorporate more sciencey aspects like ghost hunting. And so even though Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't have like ghost hunting tech, like say Ghost Hunters or BuzzFeed Unsolved, I think they all have maybe confirmation bias in it, is where, like, when people go hunting for spirits and demons, they use things like electromagnetic field detectors or radios, handheld recorders. And so where in Yu Yu Hakusho, they use a bunch of magic, to go find things. I guess like the science aspect would be how interested we are to see like what might be out there beyond death, and then to see like, can we actually connect with that world, and how people have used phenomena like, say, coldness. Like, we all hear like ghosts are like, it turns the room really cold, or maybe you'll hear some very strange sound. And so people have created these devices that you see on the Ghost Hunter TV show or BuzzFeed Unsolved, that they're actually, oh my God, if you want to go into the engineering of it, it's fascinating how these devices are made to be faulty. Okay, and so it's no accident that when you go onto Amazon and you buy like an EMF meter for $60, like a ghost detector, it will detect waves from your computer mouse, like a remote control, like anything around you. So anyway, something dressing up as Yusuke has made me think about for a future Halloween con is, what if I can get some funding, like science education funding, to go get some ghost detectors like BuzzFeed Unsolved does, and then use these ghost detectors around different everyday things and see what kind of ghosts can we find. Yeah.
I support this. I just want to say I support this. Thanks, Alyssa. Also in the chat, I see some science lovers, and also someone, While Goldine is a pharmacist. So hello, welcome. We could always be looking for a pharmacist in Cosplay for Science. There's a lot of stuff to talk about there. Jess, why don't you talk about the science in your cosplay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Cells at Work is already chock full of science already, but I guess I'll explain. For some of y'all that don't really watch the anime, the macrophage is a pretty OP character. Some of y'all that watch the anime kind of know this already. Basically, she's in charge of like cleaning up the mess in terms of like basically eating up a bunch of like anything, dirt, some bacteria it finds it can eat, all that stuff. It can clear it out of your system. They're pretty OP in that respect. One thing that people don't really know, and again, if you watch the anime, don't spoil it for anyone else, is that macrophages do also help other cells in the body recognize threats. So if a macrophage finds a different cell in the body that's like unknown, or it's some kind of junk in the body that doesn't recognize, it picks up a piece of it and then says, hey, it basically tells other cells, hey, I found something. You should probably watch out for this. I don't know what it is, but should probably watch out for this. So those are some fun science facts for you. I mean, again, I don't research human immunity. I research plant immunity. Plant immunity is way different from people immunity. There are large differences that I could go about in a large blog post, but I won't cover today because plants are very complicated. That's all I have to say.
My next game.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I don't have science about this costume specifically, but I was looking up a lot of just like the work that went into designing Shuri's costumes by the costume designer Ruth Carter for Black Panther. And she really wanted Shuri to have like a very modern look for all of her science lab attire. She didn't just want her to wear a regular lab coat, because scientists, again, wear all sorts of things, as we're demonstrating today. And she had a lot of like 3D printed materials, and there's all these different, like, both not acrylic paints like what I used on my jacket, but other acrylic threads and things that you use in your 3D printers to make something that you can actually wear. And then there's actually a whole bunch of learning sciences research on wearable materials as a way to get especially girls involved in engineering and technology and programming. So they'll try and weave in like electric wires, electric threads into fabric so that you can make whole circuits in your clothes. And they study how girls and anyone that's doing these kinds of fabric materials sciences kinds of things, what they're learning about circuits, what they're learning about electricity as they go through the process of making their own wearable designs that light up.
That's super cool. Could you send me that? Actually, I want to learn how to make some like t-shirts and stuff that have like.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of people, I think, in Illinois and Indiana that are studying.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Like I said, for me, a lot of what I do is paleontology and natural history, but for me, it's about getting people to ask the right kind of questions when they're watching a science fiction movie. Let's say you're watching like Godzilla, right? And you want to be like, wow, how does Godzilla work like in the natural world? And it's about getting them to think about how evolution, how adaptations work in reality and kind of apply that to science fiction. So like, of course, sometimes science fiction just goes above and beyond anything that we can understand, right? That's fine. That's science fiction. It's supposed to be fun and kind of outside of the realm of real. But you can still kind of figure out like what's the upper limit that something can get, how big something can get. How does an animal that's biological resist radiation poisoning when it generates the radiation itself for Godzilla? Or even in Star Wars, how does a biological animal survive in in space, right? There's nothing else there for it to eat. There's no air, there's no pressure. How does something like that survive in space? So for me, it's about getting people to ask questions about what they're seeing and think critically about how those things might exist, and then applying real world science to it. So that's a little bit what I do. And like I said, you can find out all about this. Some of our blog posts and our posts on our Instagram are all on there. So I think there's some cool stuff going on in the chat, so I'll start answering those questions too. But before we go to that, how about we go around one more time and talk a little bit about this one comment that I saw from Julia. Julia says, I love science. I just think it's so hard. And that is a very, very common thing that people say. And, there's nothing to be ashamed of that. Science can be hard, but also it doesn't have to be that hard for people to get into or try. So how about I think we go around and kind of address that comment on a way to show them that science isn't impossible, right? Jess, you want to go first?
Oh yeah, sure. Pick on the lab science. I'm kidding. Okay, well, just to say, it is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's easy, because it's not easy. But I think I just want to say that, like, it gets better when I think people have a lot of support for learning science. Like, naturally learning something by yourself is really difficult. Like, in college, when I was taking the introductory bio classes, I would not have done really well without studying with friends or something like that, especially in all the introductory classes. It's really hard to study any of these things by yourself. And even before getting to that point, it's like, if there's no if you don't really have a support group for building up that science education, you got people telling you, like, you can't do it, you're not good enough. First of all, they're not right. Nobody is not good enough for science. What does that even mean, right? And maybe it's like, I think, like, having a good support group for that sort of thing really helps a lot. And I don't have a lot to say on that subject, but, like, I think that that's really important to me, and I hope that it's important to anyone else that wants to study science as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jess. Sarah, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of Jess's sentiments. Science is hard even for scientists, but there's also, like, you don't have to necessarily have math involved in science. I know math is something that kind of turns a lot of people away from science, and I haven't taken, like, a formal math class besides statistics since high school. And I'm doing science, and I've learned a lot about, like, qualitative science, and it's just about asking questions and noticing patterns. And you can notice patterns in your everyday life anywhere. And I'm engaging with the Disney community, a lot of people that consider themselves creatives. They're making art, they're making photography. Like, there's a lot of science involved in that, of how light comes into camera lenses. Again, the fabric creations, if you're really into clothes, there's science there. But again, it's just noticing patterns and asking questions, making observations, like, why is this fabric softer than this other fabric? Like, what happens when I shoot a photo at night versus in the daytime? Or, like, if I expose something for longer and have more light coming in. It's like all making those observations and noting them down and trying to figure out patterns. And again, what Jess said about having support, like, there are so many different types of science, and being able to talk to different people from different sciences helps you come up with new questions and think about things in different ways. So it's hard, but it can be easier when you have help and when you just break science down to, like, what are the basic things that are involved in science.
Absolutely. And, Cosplay for Science is a great example for that. We're a collaborative. None of us here are the same kind of scientists. We all have very different things, but we all learn from each other. And really, getting to know all of you for sure has expanded my view on science and a lot of other things. So really, it's about talking and creating those collaborations. And in the end, they can be friendships too. Don't be afraid to reach out to scientists online. We're happy to talk to people. Yeah, we don't bite. Trust me. Well, depending on how mad I am, but we'll see. Alyssa, what do you have to say?
So, and thinking about that question, I was thinking about my own past and how I got into engineering. So, interestingly, I think math is my worst subject. I have always been better at reading and writing, to the point where when I got to college and we had, like, every first year student had to write an essay about whatever book we had to read, I actually got one of the top 10 essay awards, and I was the first engineer to do so. And the engineering college was like, we've never had a student win this. What? Like, engineers can write? What? So anyway, I think there's a lot of misconceptions too about science and engineering, that you have to be really good at math. You have to be like a stereotypical, I'm just gonna say it, usually like some kid, like a boy, like usually a boy or a man in a TV show or a movie or a book, who's always super smart, like super genius, and they wear t-shirts like "I eat math for breakfast" or something, right? That's not what an engineer has to look like. So let's see. I think, going off of what Jess and Sarah have said, first of all, identify something that you're interested in. It may be that on the way to becoming a scientist in that field, you do have to learn some basics. Like Sarah was saying, you have to learn how to do statistics. You got to learn how to do like maybe basic algebra. But I mean, it's like Sarah was saying, you don't have to use calculus or linear algebra or differential equations or any of that crazy stuff to do all kinds of science. And actually, speaking from my own engineering experience, I almost didn't become an engineer. So I went into college as a biologist because I was afraid of computer programming. Growing up in Bakersfield, California, we had no experience with programming. And I was actually joking with a friend, like, oh my gosh, what if the computer blows up? Like, what if I'm in class and like I do something stupid? You can hear all of this anxiety or insecurity coming from these comments, right? And so like Jess was saying, it's really important to where whenever you get to an aspect of science, like whether it's computer programming or physics or math, like something that you don't quite understand, to get together with friends. Sometimes these friends will just teach you a new way of looking at something, and you're like, oh, it's like that. Like sometimes, especially for math, one thing I struggled with was like if you just give me a bunch of theorems or math equations, like I don't really know what's going on. But if you give me a situation, like say for example, linear algebra is a bunch of matrices with numbers in it and it's multi-dimension. People have to use computer programming to visualize whatever's going on. And so what's interesting is that when my classmates and I took that engineering, like basic math course, it had a high, let's just say the average grade on the test was 50%. Okay, it was really bad because the course was taught by a math professor teaching engineers who like to visualize what math does or how it's used. So as a junior, when I took a biochemistry course that said, here's a bunch of chemical reactions describing what's going on. So that's stuff that we understand in biological engineering. Okay, here's something that we like and that we understand. And they described it as a matrix. Like we're going to take chemical equations, we're going to take the numbers next to the molecules, we're going to put them in a matrix. And all of us were just like, oh, that's that linear algebra stuff that we were sitting in this engineering math class for. We had no idea what was going on. And yet you put it in a situation that we enjoy. It's a science situation. We've actually drawn out the situation, because in everything we do in engineering to help us understand what's going on is that we draw the situation and we try and visualize it, and then we use math to characterize what's going on. So anyway, I guess to answer that person's question, it is okay to, I guess if you think of yourself as being like a video game character or a Pokemon with some stats, like if you're a scientist, you're really good at some things. You're not so good at others. And that's okay. Like that is totally normal. Like I said, I'm an engineer. Math is not my best subject, and I was afraid of computer programming. So.
No, thanks, Alyssa. That's so true. I think that's great because it comes back around to what we're saying, right? Science is everywhere. Like Walt Golding was saying in the chat, is like what makes a scientist is the ability to think critically and ask questions. And I think that's kind of the baseline. Another thing is people's perspective of science and scientists is actually very limited. We have this concept of what a scientist is, and I think we need to start breaking that down because, you know, to quote Ratatouille, as I always say, a scientist can come from anywhere, right? It doesn't mean that you have to have this specific path or this specific knowledge set. You know, what it is with science is about looking at the world and trying to say, I need to expand my perspective. What can I do to do that? What questions will I ask? And what directions do I need to go to find those answers? And also, we can't think of a scientist as one thing. I mean, look at us here right now. All four of us are scientists, but we are sitting here dressed up as characters, and we go to Comic-Cons, we talk about science in anime, books, Star Wars, whatever, and that still makes us a scientist. There is nothing saying anything to stop you from trying, right? I will tell you all now, my GPA graduating my undergraduate degree was a 2.67. A lot of people would consider that failure, but you know what? Whatever. I got my master's degree in geology with emphasis in vertebrate paleontology. I've published papers on specimens. I helped to describe a brand new species of walrus. I work at a museum. I have a fairly successful career as a scientist. And at one point in my life, I was like, I don't think I can do this. Science is hard. I failed physics and math and biochemistry, but I don't want to get into that because that brings back some bad memories. But in the end, science, yes, it's hard, but it's not impossible. And as Cosplay for Science, again, our job is to show you that it's not in the realm of impossibility. There are ways for you to be involved in science, to find and appreciate science, and hopefully by connecting with us, we can share our paths and our stories and help all of you broaden that perspective of the world. So again, if anybody has questions, I think we have a little bit more time for some questions you can type in the chat. But until I see anything, how about we just go around one more time and kind of give people some advice on how they can find science or connect science with something that they love, whether it's cosplay, anime, books, or whatever. Sarah, how about you go first?
All right. I mean, I think one of the basic tenets of learning science is we have to work with what people already know. So I think connecting with something that you already love is like the best thing to do because it's something you already know a lot about. And then you are more of an expert in that thing that you love. And then you can start asking more questions than someone who doesn't know anything about that thing. But yeah, ways to like try and bring science in. I think just starting with asking questions of like why and how. Like, why does this thing happen? How did that thing happen? I think about that in theme parks a lot. That's something that I really love. So how was this created? How was a movie? How is like, what is even starting with the animation of it if it's something that's animated? How did that happen? There's a whole bunch of science. I highly recommend the Science Behind Pixar. It's a whole museum exhibit that's also online that you can look up with lots of videos, lots of animators from a lot of different backgrounds, and they explain a lot of the science and math behind your favorite Pixar movies. And they even won like an Academy Award for the science that they did to do that. So I think, yeah, starting with how and why and just looking science, like type in science and your favorite thing into Google and see what you find.
Yep. All right. Jess, what do you have to say?
I might just want to piggyback off of that and say, like, you know, being just generally curious about the things that you're reading, the things that you're watching, just kind of thinking about all of this kind of content that you're thinking of. Like, maybe, like, if you're really interested in cat videos, for example, like, there's a lot of science for cats. Like, why do their claws just, why is it that when you press their claws pop out, you know, like that's kind of cool. I only say this because I had a cat recently, so I just thought about that anyway. But like, yeah, the best way I would say it is like just be curious and ask questions. There's a science for almost anything. Like I said, there are people that research cats, people that research monkeys, people that research, I don't know, how your fingernails grow. There's someone out there that's publishing papers on that. I swear, you can look it up on Google Scholar or something if there's no paywall. But anyway, like that's all I have to say. Pretty short and sweet.
Thanks, Jess. Alyssa, how about you?
Repeat the question again.
Oh, I blanked for a second.
Well, the question again
Sorry.
is like how do you find the science?
How can people connect to the science and their favorite pop culture thing, whatever it is, cosplay, comic books? What can they do to connect to it better by themselves?
So some examples that come to mind are memes. Like I know back when Tumblr still existed for like, anyway, someone, I forget what movie it was, but going into physics, for example, Dwayne Johnson would jumping out of a helicopter. It was one of those action movies, and the poster for the movie had him jumping out of a helicopter into a skyscraper window, and someone commented, but does he actually have the momentum to make it to the skyscraper? And this whole Tumblr thread was a bunch of people being like, okay, so what's his height? You know, what's the how far below is the entrance to the window for the skyscraper? How fast does Dwayne Johnson have to be going to actually go across it? It's just let's see. So sometimes like if you want to go into the trope of bad anime or superhero physics, you can just think of like, okay, so Spider-Man is swinging around on webs. How strong does this web have to be? What are spider webs made of? So I guess going off of what Jess and Sarah was saying, like be curious, ask questions. You might go into this really cool rabbit hole, like say for Spider-Man, like, oh, what are spider silks made of? People are engineering spider silks to be even stronger. People are putting it in materials and clothing. That's crazy, right? Where does Kevlar come from? Batman's suit, I think, is made of Kevlar. And it's just, yeah, it's like if you don't already have a science background, it's looking at something, being curious, asking questions, and just looking it up and just not being afraid to just delve into the details. If you already have a science background, it gets to be, sometimes I feel too nerdy. Like, have you guys ever been at a party and you're just like, I remember we were talking about Batman one time, and I was like, yeah, how many villains in Batman have PhDs? So we were talking about, or graduate degrees, so like Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy. We were talking about Man Bat, because Man Bat is I think he had a PhD as well, and he turned himself into a bat. And then we started discussing like how big does his wings really need to be to fly, and then the party conversation turned to that, and then everyone else around us is like, okay, we're just gonna go to another part of the room. And I guess another thing is, don't be afraid to just geek out. Oh, the name of the con, right? Don't be afraid to geek out and just have fun and be curious.
I do want to interject and say that for people that want to ask ridiculous questions, like how fast does the rock need to go to jump into a window? There's a person who, the creator of XKCD, I think they made a blog called What If, where they ask a bunch of ridiculous questions where it's like, oh, what if you had every element of the periodic table arranged like the periodic table, and it turns out badly, spoiler alert. So I would highly look that up. It's a really great rabbit hole of like ridiculousness. And also, there are no stupid questions, as evidenced by those kinds of blog posts. So letting you know that.
Right, and XKCD had a comic on raptors. So Gabe, like raptors are actually really small, right? And so there's right, or I guess it depends on the species, but
it depends on what type of raptor you're talking about.
Okay.
I can get into a whole separate panel about that if you all want, but what we think of Velociraptor is actually much smaller than what we saw in Jurassic Park. I'll just leave it at that.
Right, and so XKCD has an ongoing a theme. Like sometimes raptors will appear in their comics in like really funny situations, like Jess was saying. XKCD, we highly recommend it.
But yeah, I think that's kind of it for our time. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody, and of course my wonderful teammates here for joining us on Cosplay for Science and talking about it. If anybody is interested in learning more about Cosplay for Science, you can find us on our website, www.cosplayforscience.com, our Instagram, our Facebook, Twitter. We're hoping to do our own virtual con down the line. And of course, I'll let everyone kind of share where they can learn about their own work too, right? So Sarah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I am at the PhD Princess, mostly on Instagram, and then I'm at phdprincess.com. No the on the website. Yeah, I hope to connect with you all there.
You can just find me at Jess Does a Science on Instagram. If you want me on Twitter, it's Jess_Trin. That's it. I know that's different, but it's okay.
Alyssa?
My Instagram is at queering_engineering. And I post some science things and also whatever I'm working on, like cosplays or video games.
Awesome. And I'm at Paleo Paradox, and you can usually find fossils or cosplay or my corgi on there, wherever he is right now. There he is. But yeah, so thank you all so much. And thank you so much to Naja and the Goesh for having us on this panel today. We really, really appreciate it. And we had a lot of fun.
Oh, you guys did such a great job, and thank you guys so much. I'm glad you guys had such a great time and you had so much fun. And I hope everybody, it seems like everybody who was watching was having fun too. I saw the comments. I'm pretty sure they're on fire with the tapping of the fingers. Please make sure you guys also just check out all of their stuff on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for Cosplay for Science. And I really appreciate having you guys. And the next panel that's going to come up is an interview with a Black Ramen Podcast. And make sure you guys also check out our website at goasicon.com. All right. Thank you guys. See you later. Bye.